Welcome to the Dot Citizen Podcast. I'm Chrisella Herzog.
And I'm Zachary Stickney.
And we are your hosts.
In this month's mini-series, we're going to be focusing on election security.
Because if you haven't noticed, there's an election coming up really soon. So, before we get started with any of this, go vote. Just pause this podcast, go vote right now. Right now. It's more important than this.
Have you voted already?
My ballot is half filled out.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. I sent mine in last week, so I'm good.
I'm stuck on the judges. The judges are tough.
Yeah, the judges.
Like, there's got to be a better system for electing judges or something.
And
I
just
don't know.
on that note quickly, if you go to the website where they review all the judges, literally every single judge they say retain.
Right.
There's
yeah.
not a single.
That's the problem I have with it. It's like,
Right.
I know that not every judge is deserving of being retained. So, like, there's got to be a better system for actually
Yeah.
independently reviewing these judges.
There were only like 2 of them that the vote was even close. Everyone else, it was like 11-0, 13-0.
Wow.
Everybody's just on board. So either we have really awesome judges or we're just
No.
not really diving
No.
into that deep.
There's no independent review of it, and it's not great. So, yeah. So anyway, go out and vote. It's really important this year. If you're here with us in Utah, then you really don't have an excuse. We have a mail-in ballot. You can register to vote the same day that you go to the polls. Just register right there at the polls. So seriously, get out and vote. Very important.
And hopefully this doesn't seem at all counterintuitive in some ways because of what we're focusing on in this first week. Because I don't know about you, but just after the 2016 election, we've just kind of been thrown into this world where all of a sudden we have all these questions about voting and about the legitimacy behind it, what actors are trying to, nudge their way into this system and try to and throw dirt on it and make it appear illegitimate. I mean, it's just kind of it's baffling right now.
Yeah, and it's not something that's just happening here in the U.S. There's a lot of examples of it happening outside of the U.S., but maybe it's a bit of a shock for us here in the U.S. because our elections have been so sacrosanct for so long, and we've always assumed that, our elections were secure and they were highly legitimate and we could trust the process. And now all of a sudden there's distrust and fears about security being thrown into all of that, and it's a big change for us as Americans.
And I think really the main thing to remember is that even with all the questions that are happening right now, I still think big picture that our process is pretty secure and is legitimate. But one of the main reasons we're bringing this up in these episodes is kind of to point out that might not remain the case if we're not careful, if we're not being proactive about ensuring that these processes are secure, ensuring that information is getting out to people where they need it. I mean, there's all kinds of questions that we need to be proactive about addressing. Otherwise, we might not have the system that we've enjoyed for so long, for very long.
I absolutely agree. Like, as it stands, our elections have been able to withstand a lot over the past, 200-ish years. And
it's a pretty good track record.
It really is, but at the same time, things are changing all the time. And that's one of the things that we're talking about in Dot Citizen in general is that things are changing. Technology is causing disruption. And if we're not aware of how that disruption is affecting our elections as well, then we're going to fall behind, and that track record of security and legitimacy could be lost.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we're hoping to do with this mini-series on election security is to hopefully make this a little bit less overwhelming and kind of clarify some of the key issues that I think we're facing now in this current election and moving forward. And, just start building that culture of trying to maintain the legitimacy that we've had for so long.
Mm-hmm. I think this podcast is a good start because, I've kind of been following this issue since summer of 2016, before the elections actually happened. And even still with the people that we're talking to in this series, I learned a lot from our conversations there. And I think that will be the case for a lot of our listeners as well. And part of the reason why I think that is because around this topic of election security and legitimacy, there's not exactly, I don't want to say that it's a culture of secrecy, because that's not exactly the case, but it's a culture of non-transparency where we're almost hesitant to talk about these issues, as if talking about them will harm the legitimacy of our elections just by having that conversation and questioning that, or if it'll maybe, harm the security. I know with with government organizations, a lot of them hold the cards close as to what's going on with security in that field, because they don't want vulnerabilities to get out there that could be exploited. And corporations certainly do not come from a culture of being willing to admit either vulnerabilities in their system or culpability in what they may have caused. Definitely something we're going to be talking about in these episodes ahead. So, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about who we're going to be talking to in this series. So we have some great episodes coming up ahead, and we hope that you'll sit down and listen to all of them. In our first episode in the election security series, we're going to be talking to the ambassador of Ukraine to the United States, Valery Chali. He was in Utah recently, and I had the chance to sit down with him for a quick interview and talk a little bit about his perspective on election security in his country, knowing that Russia has been really working hard to target Ukraine and really undermine their elections. And so his perspective on where these attacks fall on the spectrum of, interference to full out warfare is really it's really interesting.
And I'm really excited to listen to this episode as well, because I unfortunately wasn't able to join for that interview. It was kind of a
ambassador schedules.
Yeah, so we're very lucky we were able to get some time with him at all. But Ukraine, to me, is an especially interesting case because they sort of served as like a proving ground for Russia early on, both in terms of trying to, hijack elections, but also in attacks on infrastructure like their power grid and so forth. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, it's really a country that I think people need to really pay close attention to in seeing some of the possibilities of different kinds of cyber attacks and, kind of get an idea of what might be coming next and how to prepare for something similar and the possibility of it happening in the United States or elsewhere. And then after that, we've invited Dr. Shannon McGregor. She's an assistant professor in the communications department at the University of Utah. And she focuses very closely on political communication, especially, whether it's things like Twitter or Facebook.
Well, I'm really interested to hear what Shannon has to say as far as what is going on, as far as how we talk about our politics on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, and how our political dialogue is shaped in those spaces. But also, I think this is also a really important conversation to have because, we've kind of seen how these social media platforms have reacted when going in front of Congress. Yeah. Facebook hasn't been extremely willing to admit some of the things that have happened on their platform, especially as far as advertising goes. And I would argue that even still their advertising platform and the way that the steps that they have taken to be transparent about people using their advertising platform haven't been enough. So Shannon's perspectives on all of this are going to be extremely interesting, and I'm really excited to hear from her as well.
Excellent. All right, and who's our last guest?
Harry Hursty, the co-founder of the voting machine hacking village at DEF CON. So DEF CON is the world's largest hacker conference, and it's held every year in Las Vegas. You have people from, people who just love hacking to computer security professionals and security researchers to journalists to employees of DHS and NSA showing up to learn about vulnerabilities in our technology. And after the 2016 election, Harry was one of the people who came together to put together a voting village where people could come in and literally try to hack the very technology that we use in our election systems. And some of the stuff that they discovered in there has been mind-blowing.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah. So that's going to be a really great conversation, and we're really looking forward to having you join us on this journey through election security. So if you want to follow the Dot Citizen podcast, you can find us on Twitter at @CitizenPod. If you use Twitter a lot, we hope that you'll send us your feedback and your messages and kind of some ideas about future episodes that we could talk about. We have a bunch of ideas, but of course we want to hear from you too. You can find the podcast itself on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and Google Play. If you don't listen to podcasts on any of those platforms, you can also find the Dot Citizen podcast at whitehatmag.com/podcasts. That's plural, podcasts with an S, where we'll be putting up all of these interviews, especially the election security ones there, because this is such an important topic, and we hope that you will share it with all of your voting friends as well. And hopefully all your friends are voting.
That sounds good. So again, just big picture, go vote, listen to Dot Citizen podcast on voting, and that's about it. I think that those are the top two things you need to take care of.
We'll talk to you next time.